This is Billy Russell's story of how, because of addiction, I went through 15 years of pain and punishment and suffering and always viewed it as exactly that. And then I finally realized the truth behind the verse of your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Because they were always there, corralling me and bumping me back into line, sometimes a hard bump, but nonetheless kept me moving forward, kept me standing back up, kept me going. Even though I didn't know where I was going, I was going. And I realize that if you were there then you're here now, and you always will be. And that is the most comforting thing in my life. Because for 15 years, I fought a war no one could see, with smiles on my face, but chains binding me. I laughed with the world, stayed upbeat, stood tall, while a whisper of sorrow still haunted it all. A silent unrest sat behind every grin. A battle half hidden kept raging within. Though sunlight appeared in the words that I spoke, inside me lived something still starving and broke. For 15 long years, I kept trying to stand, while liquor kept slipping like sand through my hand. I swore I was done. Then I shattered once more and woke in the ruins I'd stood in before. It changes a soul when you fail and repeat, when defeat knows your name and remembers your feet, when promises made in the midnight grow cold, and you become someone you never foretold. I told myself often, why this? Why me? Why can't I drink lightly? Why can't I be free? Why must this be harder for me than the rest? Why is this one trial the never-ending test? I envied the man who could leave it at 2, who laughs with a glass and then simply was through. I wondered what flaw had been carved in my frame that made every sip feel like it was calling my name. I carried the weight of the wreckage I made, of trust I had broken, of debts left unpaid, of faces I loved that I'd wounded with shame, in nights when I barely could look at my name. There were jails and cold cells and those hard closing doors, rehabs and the ache of institutional floors, probation officers' lectures and loss, and counting the cost of my own private cross. There was money poured out like a river gone wrong, and seasons that felt like I'd wandered too long. Each consequence landed and bruised like a brand, and I took them for punishment, not for your hand. I thought every blow was just proof I was less, a verdict pronounced on my failure's excess. I thought I was cursed by the things I had done, too broken for mercy, too far from your sun. But then in a moment, as quick as a breath, in 10 seconds flat, life was rescued from death. Not from outwardly dying, but dying inside. And suddenly something eternal replied. The question I'd carried was shattered apart as heaven broke open a door in my heart. Not why is this hard, or why can't I be through, but God, how am I this blessed by you? How lucky am I, through the blood and the pain, to still hear your voice through the thunder and rain. How lucky am I that though beaten and torn, I still wake with breath and a reason each morn. How lucky am I this was not just defeat, not 15 years bowing in shame at hell's feet, but 15 years proving, though battled and sore, I still rose again and kept walking once more. This was not 15 years of continuing failure. It was 15 years learning where I belong. Not 15 years wasted in endless disgrace, but 15 years carried by unmerited grace. What I called all failure, you called perseverance. What I named abandonment, you named endurance. Where I saw a gravestone for all I had lost, you showed me your soldier, still paying the cost. Round after round, in the ring of despair, I thought I stood bleeding, and no one was there. But you stood beside me through every dark round, even when my knees and my hope hit the ground. The enemy struck me with fists made of lies, till blood from the battle ran into my eyes, and blinded I staggered, half wild and half numb, not knowing how often you whispered, still come. So now I say, God, please forgive what I missed, the ways I stayed blind to your love in the mist. Forgive me for thinking I fought all alone, when all of that time you were making me known. Forgive me for calling your rescue a rod, but never recognizing it was the hand of my God. Forgive me for naming as curse or as chain the things that were keeping me here through the pain. For every hard consequence, every closed gate was not just blind wrath or the sneer of my fate. It was often your mercy, severe, but still kind. Offense for a heart that had wandered half blind. Your rod and your staff I see differently now. I feel their deep meaning and tremble and bow. For even the blows that I once thought unfair were keeping me living because you were there. You pulled me back close with the crook of your grace when I ran from your shelter and hid from your face. And sometimes you struck at what sought me to kill, though I could not fathom your mercy-filled will. Psalm 23 became no longer a verse, but truth for the valley where things had been worse. Though I walk through death's shadow, I will not give in, for you walk beside me and stand in the din. I now know the valley was never unled. I now know why I wasn't found cold or found dead. I now know why giving up never felt right, because you were my shepherd, still urging the fight. And all those dark nights when I should have gone under, when shame split my chest like unbearable thunder, when something inside me still reached for the light, that something was you saying, stand up and fight. You gave me the strength, not just once, but again, to rise from the wreckage and enter the ring. Not only the strength, but the will to still care, to keep seeking help when despair filled the air. That willingness mattered more than I knew, for left to myself, I'd have never come through. The flesh says, lie down, this is all you will be. But grace says, stand up, there is more yet to see. I used to believe that with enough self-command, a man could conquer anything by his own hand. That iron resolve and sufficient control could master the chaos and strengthen the soul. I was not raised under church steeples and song, but under the creed that the self must be strong, that weakness was failure, dependence was shame, and power was proved by the force of one's name. But now I have learned what pride could never teach, that God's truest power is not ours to reach by white-knuckled striving or force of demand, but only received with an open, weak hand. My will was not Savior, it stood in the way, a wall built from ego and fear and delay. I thought I was fighting by gripping more tight, while losing the strength that descends from his might. Then Paul's ancient thorn became living to me, not distant theology, but what helped me see that weakness is not where God's goodness is banned, but often the place where his mercy will land. Your strength is made perfect where mine comes undone, where boasting is silenced and self-help is none, where all of my swagger lies broken and still, and all that remains is surrender to will. Not my will, Lord Jesus, but yours in me now. Please teach my stubborn spirit surrender somehow. For every time I tried to save myself first, I deepened the ache and intensified thirst. But when I fell low enough to finally to see that I could not conquer this giant in me, then heaven broke in through the cracks of my pride, and power I never possessed stepped right inside. How strange that the thing I begged God to remove, this thorn in the flesh I could never outmove, has shown me more truth than my comfort could teach, and brought me to graces I never could reach. I would not have chosen this path for my feet, this furnace of craving, this cycle of defeat, but standing here now, with new eyes in my chest, I see how even this thorn through you has been blessed. Not blessed because pain is itself something pure. Not blessed because suffering should be endured. For suffering's sake, but because you can bend even the sharpest of thorns toward holy end. Alcohol took much that I never regained, and many sweet places were darkened or stained. I cannot deny what my addiction has cost, nor speaking as though nothing of value was lost. There are pieces of trust that rebuild very slow, and names I once answered that I no longer know. There are memories heavy with sorrow and smoke, and thoughts that still tremble about each time I broke. There were mornings of nausea, guilt, and disgust, and evenings where promises crumbled to dust. There were mirrors I hated, and prayers I half spoke, and laughter that sounded like something half broke. There were loved ones exhausted from hoping anew, from hearing me swear what I never lived through. And I do not take lightly the pain that I gave, nor use grace as an excuse for the harm I have made. But I also refuse now to live as though all of my worth is the echo of each drunken fall. For years I let past failures author my name, and paint both my present and future with shame. I let old defeats become prophecy's voice, as though I were trapped with no future, no choice, as though what I'd done was the limit of me, and my worst yesterdays were all I could be. That lie has been broken, and now I can see my past is not lord of my destiny. Regret may still visit and memory remain, but neither can chain what you've freed from its pain. I do regret much, and I likely always will. For some scars run deep, and some rooms still grow still. But regret is no longer the lens that I wear, for now I can see that you've always been there. You were there in jail cells, cold, stripped, and bare. You were there in the rehab and stale recycled air. You were there in probation, in lectures, in fines, in the breaking of my pride and the redrawing of lines. You were there in the losses that made me kneel low, in the doors that stayed shut, though I begged them to open. You were there in the moments I wanted to cease, keeping one ember alive for a future of peace. You were there when I hated the man I had been, and could not imagine you entering in. You were there when I couldn't love even myself, yet still writing my name in the book on your shelf. Thank you for loving me then, not just now. Not just once I learned to surrender and bow. Not just when perspective came flooding like dawn, but all through the nights I kept painfully on. Thank you for guarding me in a life I abused, for staying so near when my heart stayed confused, for not turning away when I buried my face, but answering ruin with more of your grace. Thank you for every prevented abyss, for mercies I noticed and mercies I missed, for all the unseen times you stood in the way of death, of destruction I nearly obeyed. Thank you for not letting failure define the shape of my soul or the scope of my time. Thank you that even in weakness and loss, you still saw a son worth the blood of the cross. The world says, be stronger, push harder, prevail. But you meet the broken, the bruised, and the frail. You do not despise those brought low by the fight, but fill empty hands with impossible might. And now what once seemed like a sentence of shame has become a fierce altar that hallowed your name. For had I not suffered this terrible need, I might never have learned what it means to be freed. I might have kept trusting my own little throne, mistaking self-mastery for being my own. I might have kept walking so far from your side, still polished outside, but inwardly died. But here in the ashes, I finally see that true life begins when there's much less of me, when all I can offer is ruin and need, and all you keep offering is exactly what frees. So call me not cursed by the fight I have known, for even this battlefield brought me back home. Call me a witness that mercy can find a man half destroyed, but restored in his mind. Call me a fighter, though often brought low. For 15 long years I still rose from each blow, not because I was mighty, unyielding, or grand, but because unseen mercy kept lifting me. It was your hand. 15 years, not of failure alone, but of God refusing to leave me alone. 15 years, not of merely lost ground, but of heaven pursuing me round after round. 15 years of not giving death final say. 15 years of grace keeping madness at bay. 15 years of my story not ending in night because God kept on whispering, stand, there is light. And now with new eyes, I look back through the dust, and I do not see only collapse and mistrust. I see an unbroken, invisible thread. A shepherd who helped me where I stood and bled. I see holy protection in things I once cursed. I see love in the places that once felt the worst. I see the valley was not proof you withdrew, but proof I could walk through because of you. And if you were with me when I could not see, then surely you will not stop walking with me. If you held me then in confusion and fear, then surely your presence remains ever here. That truth is the deepest of comforts I know. more steady than feelings that come and then go. The sweetest assurance that carries me through. You always were there, and you'll always be too. So now I sink deeper, not into despair, but into your presence, discovering you there, and gathering close to the ones who do same, whose lives burn with love and are lit by your name. I know that this war, though still raging within, will not end in defeat or addiction's grim grin. For how can hell conquer what heaven upholds? How can night claim the heart that your sunlight now holds? There's absolutely no path where I lose, if daily I yield what I used to misuse. If daily I lay down my pride at your feet, then even my weakness becomes your defeat. Not yours, but the enemy's, crushed by your grace, by truth taking root in that old haunted place, by fellowship, prayer, and a life redefined, by light entering rooms long boarded in mind. I do not say easy. I say held and led. I do not say never tempted ahead. I do not say battle will banish from view. I say I no longer will fight it without you. For years I believed I must handle the war, must drag my own body half dead to the shore. But now I know better. The victory starts when God takes the battlefield first in our hearts. So let every meeting and tear and hard mile, every grim consequence borne for a while, every relapse that left me ashamed and undone, be gathered by grace in the work you have done. Let none of it vanish as meaningless pain, but let it bear fruit like the sweetest of rain. Let every old scar become part of the song that tells of a God who stays patient and strong. And if I speak softly or loudly someday to someone still trapped in this terrible way, let them hear not my pride, but the hope that is true. If God did this for me, He can do it for you. For there is no person too far in the night, no soul too addicted to reach for the light, no history dark enough, jagged or grim, to outrun the mercy still offered by Him. I know what it means to be tired, clear through, to hate what you do and still go back to do, to want to be free with all parts of your frame, while craving still answers your deepest name. I know what it means to disgust your own heart, to swear every dawn is a fresh, new, clean start. Then hear by the evening the same old demand, and watch all your vows fall like ash through your hand. So when I say grace, I do not mean theory. I mean rescue that entered a mind growing weary. I mean revelation in under 10 seconds that changed what 15 years of sorrow had reckoned. I mean the explosion of heavenly sight that turned all my questions inside out to light, that took why so hard and made wonder begin. How blessed I have been that God was within. How blessed to have lived through what should have destroyed. How blessed that the enemy never enjoyed a final possession, a permanent claim, because God kept protecting the spark of my name. How blessed that punishment was not the whole tale, that mercy was hidden inside every flail. How blessed that the hand I mistook for severe was often the hand keeping death from me near. How blessed that weakness became the true door, where power from heaven could enter the war. How blessed that surrender, not ego or pride, at last made a place where your strength could abide. How blessed that I was not raised to see the beauty of church and humility. You still found a way through the wreckage and din to show me that true strength begins when we bend. And now I can say with a full, grateful soul that you were behind every moment of hold, behind every comeback, each reaching, each try, each refusal to fully lay down and to die. You were in the interest I still had to fight, in the strange, stubborn ember that looked for the light, in the fact that I cared when it hurt me to care, that even in numbness, some hope lingered there. That hope was not mine in its origin, Lord. It came from the touch of your sharp unseen sword, dividing the lie from the life you had planned, and training my weakness to trust your right hand. So here at this turn in the road of my days, I offer not rehearsed, polished religious phrase, but something more honest, more broken, more true. Thank you, my God, for all you still do. Thank you for staying when I could not stand, for lifting me up with your compassionate hand, for loving me fully when I loathed my reflection, for wrapping my ruin in your patient correction. Thank you for every dark valley crossed through, for Psalm 23 become living and true, for rod and for staff, for the pull and the fight, for mercy disguised as the things I called blight. Thank you for Paul and the thorn that remained, for weakness that humbled and power unchained, for teaching me self-will is not what will save, and that grace builds a champion out of the grave. Thank you that past does not govern my end, that shame is not master, not loss, nor best friend, that you who were with me in all I went through will remain as the one who carries me through. And so I will walk with my eyes open wide, no longer assuming you are not beside. I will remember the places you stood and call what I once called unfairly your good. Not good in the pain, but good in your hand. Good in the way you could still understand how to turn every blow and every scarred place into proof of your patience and evidence of grace. I will surround myself deep in your flame with people whose lives bear the fruit of your name. I will keep leaning where true life begins, and let holy fellowship strengthen my limbs. And if there are battles still left in this war, I know now much more than I ever knew before. I do not fight solo, abandoned, unknown. The Lord of all mercy has called me his own. So let hell remember each round that I stayed, each time that I rose, though I reeled and I swayed. Let darkness take note that its beating was vain, for God used each blow to reveal himself plain. I am still here breathing, still learning to see, still growing in truth that is setting me free. Still humbled, still grateful, still marked by your love, still held by strong hands from the heavens above. And one day, I'll look at this chapter and know even more clearly why I had to go through fires that stripped me of all but your name, so I could be healed by the heart of your flame. Until then, I stand with a different refrain, no longer just mourning the cost and the pain, but marveling, awed by the grace that pursued, by a God I once missed, yet who never withdrew. So hear me, Lord Jesus, with tears in my eyes. I see more of the truth than the enemy's lies. I see that you loved me through all I went through, and all that is left in my heart is thank you. I'll never forget what your mercy has done, how you stood in the dark till the long night was done, how you turned my worst years to a testimony and taught me your strength blooms when mine is so lonely. I love you for staying. I love you for grace. I love you for never once leaving my place. I love you for fighting when I could not see. I love you, dear God, for not giving up on me.